Welcome to Unschool, where we undoctrinate you from public school nonsense. Haven't you heard? DEI is dead, or this is at least the beginning of the end. It's on life support. It's almost gone. No, we're not quite there yet, but we are on a positive trajectory. At least it seems that way to me. Florida has started a trend, and I think that it will continue, at least in red states, to try to get rid of DEI, right? Hopefully it's the beginning of the end. Surely a lot of these colleges and universities are going to fail if they don't change things up quite soon. They're losing millions of students. The colleges have lost millions of students in the past decade, and it doesn't look good for them. So it is pretty exciting that guys like Governor Ron DeSantis are saying, hey, let's get rid of this, right? Florida is where DEI goes to die. Ain't that the truth, right? University of Florida is firing all employees in DEI, and seems to me that this is going to be a positive movement. But we're going to discuss in this video whether it really is the end and what's going to be happening next. So already we got people trying to rebrand DEI, right? Propaganda is the government's version of advertising or marketing. It's what they do. They already rebranded Marxism as equity once before. They're going to try to rebrand it as something else. The ESG is failing now as well. They're just going to try to rebrand it. They will try to bring it back. Opponents to changes to DEI worry some students will be harmed, but they haven't seen proposals yet. We know they'll be harmed. Putting political identity over your intrinsic value as a human being is not a good move, and it will fail. Two Utah lawmakers released the initial text of the bill seeking to overhaul diversity, equity, and inclusion programs at public universities. DEI should not be allowed in the universities. Although the university system did start as religious institutions in Europe centuries ago, I'm not sure we've completely gotten rid of it. It seems to me that they're just pushing a different type of a religion. Rather, they pushed Christian values than Marxist values, though, my goodness. The bill, HB 261, titled Equal Opportunity Initiatives, was released on Thursday by Representative Katie Hall. And obviously, Utah is making an effort to get rid of these DEI nonsense practices. If you support equity, you reject equality. You would definitely reject equality of opportunity. You don't believe in it, and you should not pretend that you do. Utah Governor Spencer Cox spoke out against DEI initiatives at a press conference last month, arguing that they had failed to achieve their stated goals of helping students. No, they didn't help students. They lost millions of students across the country in the past 10 to 15 years. Identitarianism, that could be considered maybe a new religious cult, and it stifles intellectual diversity. It stifles thought itself. It's Orwellian. We have people now trying to ban words like immigrant because it's supposedly condescending. Mayorkas is the latest to push that ridiculous endeavor. So we need to push against DEI across the country, across all public schools, and we need to support school choice. James Lindsay has been adamant about this for the past few years, and this article here comes from his website, New Discourses, where he says, we all know academia is in trouble. In fact, we're not even sure it can be saved. I'm on that boat. I don't think it can be saved. I think we need a diversity of ways to educate people, right? Not through the Department of Education. It needs to be abolished. To put it simply, the university is dying. To be sure, it's a strange death. However, because the university is in some sense going back to its roots, returning to being theological seminaries, though in a completely new religion, and that's a religion that has not yet been named, right? It's something derivative of Marxism, right? You have your postmodernism, you have your critical race theorists, queer theorists, fat conscious theorists, and so on and so forth. And those are all different denominations of the same religion. That religion is the transformative religion of dialectical leftism. Okay, well, that's what he calls it. However, I would say that fascism could also fit under all of that since it's also derivative of Marxist ideology. And its materialist watchword in the 21st century is sustainability. Okay. Sustainability is highly overrated. Really, what that means is you have to allow the government to usurp your rights. That's what they're arguing in favor of. A removal of individual rights and replacement with collectivist rights, which, by the way, do not exist. There are no collectivist rights. That's just utopian shill shilly nonsense that socialists and fascists push for. So, in my opinion, people are tired of this, and you see a rise in the renegades of the intellectual dark web. James Lindsay is one of those individuals. This article covers Eric Weinstein, that's over here, who's over here on the right, and his brother Brett Weinstein, who was kicked out of Evergreen in Washington State because he didn't want to support No White People Day or whatever they called it at the university. Basically, segregation, right? We see the universities pushing anti-Semitism. We see them pushing anti-racism. They are the racists, the universities, right? And the dark web is pushing against that. The intellectual dark web there, and there's a lot of other individuals that are pushing against the narratives of the education system, pushing against identity politics. Right? It's a toxic ideology. Right? Identity politics is toxic. Masculinity is not toxic. I have an article about that on my Substack as well, and it's tearing American society apart. And it's really, it seems to me that we're separating each other based on who believes the mainstream media and who doesn't. It's not as much right or left anymore. There are right and left people that are part of the intellectual dark web that are rejecting progressivism, that are rejecting socialism, communism, fascism, and so on. Basically, rejecting extremism. Sam Harris is right wing. He met with the neuroscientist Eric Weinstein, who's left wing, and the manager of Field Capital, managing director of Field Capital, the commentator and comedian Dave Rubin, who's also moved, he says, from left wing to right wing. A decade ago, they argued when Donald Trump was still hosting The Apprentice. None of these observations would have been considered taboo, right? Especially the criticism of identity politics. Today, people like them who dare venture into this there be dragons territory on the intellectual map have met with outrage and derision. Imagine arguing in favor of equality of opportunity and being derided for it, right? That's what's happening to them. They pride themselves on openness, right? But they won't be touting around the pride flag. It's a pattern that has become common in our new era of that which cannot be said, right? It's very Orwellian. We're being told what we can and cannot say on college campuses. There are not much in the way of free speech anymore. It's quite disappointing. What is the IDW and who is a member of it? It's hard to explain, which is both its beauty and its danger. Some people are saying that conservatism is the new counterculture. I agree with that, but I also think there's a variety of people that are trying to join this IDW. So, Weinstein and his brother, Eric, his sister in law, evolutionary biologists, including Heather Heying, that's Weinstein's wife. Jordan Peterson is obviously part of the intellectual dark web. Ben Shapiro, Douglas Murray. I'm not familiar with Majid Nawaz. Former Islamist turned anti-extremist activist. Well, that sounds good. Ayan Hirsi, I'm only a little familiar with. Christina Hoff Sommers is, she still calls herself a feminist, but she's quite critical of femcells and the kind of nonsense that's expressed on college campuses where they spend a lot of time criticizing men. She is like I forget what she calls herself, the rational feminist or something like that. And she's got some great videos on her YouTube channel. Unfortunately, she doesn't really make new ones anymore, but she's interesting. All right, but so on and so forth. There's a lot of people in there that I think you should follow. Those are the people that I've been following for the past few years that have influenced my worldview, and so I'd recommend looking into that. And here actually is an article from Wikipedia, which positively kind of talks about the intellectual dark web. They say individuals and publications associated with the term reject what they view as authoritarianism and ostracism within mainstream progressive movements in Western countries, especially within universities and the news media. right? Universities and news media are out of control and will be the death of the West if we don't all offer up alternative viewpoints. This includes opposition to deplatforming, and they don't mention debanking here, but also that boycotts, online shaming, which are seen as threats to freedom of speech. Those who have been labeled as part of the IDW include both liberals and conservatives. The validity of the term is contested by some and has been applied to because of the range of beliefs it encompasses. Well, the overarching belief is that people still deserve to have free speech in this country and don't deserve to be pushed out via some Orwellian nonsense. So there's a lot of things going on in the education system today that they're fighting against. It's this article here from Cato says federal bureaucrats are wrong about West Virginia's higher education funding. The federal government has accrued massive deficits in the last 2 decades and accomplished nothing as a result, right? More money in education over the past 50 years, and all we've gotten is more administrators. That is a obvious statistical fact. There's been no improvement in the students to teacher ratios in public schools over the past 50 years. It's still over 20 to 1, which is ridiculous, particularly in the younger grades. So, the USDA and the U.S. Department of Education sent a letter to 16 states alleging major funding disparities between the states' land grant historically black colleges and universities and non HBCU land grant universities. One of the letters was addressed to Western Virginia Governor Jim Justice. The letter alleged that over the last 30 years, West Virginia State University, a land grant HBCU, has been underfunded by $850 million. Well, I doubt that's true. People just say that money is the solution to all these problems. Even 30 years ago, we still had a lot of schools that used chalkboards, and people were still more literate than they are today. Right? Kids have fallen far behind, and not just because of coronavirus, because in the past decade, the education system has pushed ideology uber alles, and it's been completely ineffective. The letter advises West Virginia to make substantial state allocation towards the HBCU deficit, combined with a forward-looking budget commitment for a 2-to-1 match of federal land grant funding for these institutions in order to bring parity to funding levels. I would suggest they go back to not Du Bois, he's a communist, to Booker T. Washington, who advocated for teaching people practical skills and educating everyone, not just a select group of woke communist losers, right? Booker T. Washington, that's what we need. Education and entrepreneurship and an emphasis on discipline, not just feelings. So it says, attempting to advocate for increased investments to service their historically disadvantaged population. However, such arguments do not seem to apply. Ever since desegregation, the school has ceased to be a majority black institution. Moreover, in 1957, WVSU became the only land grant HBCU to lose its land grant status. The status was only returned in 2001. So it is likely that any increases in funding will advance educational equity. Well, we don't want equity. That's equality of outcomes. We want diversity of thoughts and diversity of career paths, not everyone pursuing the same thing, right? What do you get from equity? You get Maoist style revolutions where they force regular people to try to turn their homes into little factories by force. I think that when Mao forced everyone to create iron ore or some nonsense, and it failed miserably. Moreover, the USDA and the U.S. Department of Education's boilerplate proposal ignores some sobering realities about West Virginia's demography. From 2010 to 2001, West Virginia's population shrunk by 3.8%, and it kept on decreasing. Coal and mine industry is declining, and so on and so forth. Next up, nobody wants to attend school anymore. Not for years. Did COVID make it worse? Sure. We can agree with that. Did COVID make absenteeism worse? Yes. Nobody wants to attend. Absenteeism is now chronic, but there are some upsides. 1 in 10 students are now homeschooled. I think that's great. Are there flaws in homeschooling? Is it a panacea? No, It's not perfect, but it's better than a public school overall. It says here consistent attendance is key to student success, but post pandemic attendance has been far from consistent. You know what I'd say about that though? You could probably have students in class for a way shorter period of time than what they are currently, like a half day, and then go get a job, at least from like, teenage, being a teenager onward. I think that would be beneficial. There's too much time that's spent in school where children are just babysat. It's not good. But the percentage of students missing at least 10% of the school year surged from 15% in 2018 to 28% in 2022. That's pretty surprising that it's that high, but I think students and probably parents alike have both decided public school is a waste of time. They're not being taught how to learn. If you want to learn how to read, you have to do it somewhere else. That's terrible. You spend so much time in public schools for 12 years and you can't teach people how to read. That's a simple thing. It's not complicated. Why can't they do it? Failing in 33 of 39 states reporting data, chronic absenteeism rates improved in 2003, but still remain 75% higher than the pre pandemic baseline. So, still below the average. Chronic absenteeism increased for all district types, but rates were highest in districts with low achievement and higher poverty, affecting over 1 in 3 students. In 2022, 16% of Asian students and 24% of white students were chronically absent, compared to 36% of Hispanic and 39% of black students. So nobody's really doing well. Everyone's missing a lot of school. The urgent need to recover from pandemic learning loss will be severely hampered by current rates of chronic absenteeism, making it the most pressing post pandemic problems in public schools. How about we embrace uh, school choice and get rid of the Department of Education? How's that sound for a solution? I think that's a great idea, and I don't know that you're really missing that much by not attending as much public school as you should. In the past, I would say that's bad, right? You miss one day and you fall behind. In the past, nowadays, it's likely they'll just be spending the whole week catching up. It's kind of a big waste of time. So here's another article that says Ben Shapiro reveals how UCLA med students are taught anti-white, anti-American hatred. That's true. They're trying to bring equity to the medical field, which is pretty worrisome, right? Equity in the medical field would mean because of past discrimination, if you go to the doctor and you have a broken limb and you're white, you might have to wait behind somebody who's a minority who has the sniffles, even though their illness is not as bad. You're going to have to wait because of supposed discrepancies of the past. But we all know that throughout history, all societies have had some oppressors and some oppression. It's not like it only belongs to one particular group. So it says here UCLA's medical school were mandated to learn about colonialism and liberation during their first year in medical school, right? And you hear a lot of discussion from the far leftists talking about decolonizing the curriculum because they think it's part of some woke Gnostic cult. Or, I mean, that's what we think it is. They think it's part of some white supremacist cult or something, which is ridiculous. So, this is a Gnostic religion. They think that it's not God that made the universe; it's the devil, and they have to destroy the devil in order to usher in the utopia. Every iteration of Marxism is utopian in its thinking. They believe that they can create some sort of utopia on Earth if they just get rid of that one thing. Now, the only difference in the differing denominations are what type of thing they think they need to get rid of. Some people think it's class consciousness that they need to focus on, some racial, some sexual consciousness, and so on and so forth. But it's all BS. It's really myopic for them to think that just getting rid of that one thing will usher in some sort of utopia. Shapiro obtained internal documents from UCLA's medical school documenting how med students have to take a class called Structural Racism and Health Equity, which teaches them about indigenous resistance and white colonialism. Ben Shapiro's report comes after lawmakers across the country have expressed concern over the infiltration of diversity, equity, inclusion principles into the medical field. What? Why do they need to learn these things? Structural racism and health equity? There isn't any structural racism in the medical field to speak of. That's pretty ridiculous. Health equity is what I talked about earlier. It's not good. You're gonna hire surgeons as well based on health equity as opposed to who does the job first. That's kind of dangerous. I don't want people, conducting surgery on me because of some equity organization got them into their position. I want the best possible person for the job. People who spent the most time educating themselves, their solutions here are a little scary. So I definitely don't want this to happen. And what indigenous resistance and white colonialism has to do with the medical field? To a rational person, the answer is nothing. It doesn't have anything to do with it, and it's a little ridiculous. Let's remember that the so-called colonizers actually went around the world and ended slavery. Right, the big one, the British Empire, initiated the blockade of Africa in 1809, and they stopped the Atlantic slave trade. Like, the British are the ones responsible for that. They're the ones that did it. They also made an effort to stop um, slavery in countries like Nigeria and other parts of Africa. And it took decades. They didn't do it right off the bat, but it's not so easy to end something that existed in West Africa for more than 4,000 years, probably something like 6,000 years. I don't remember the origins of civilization in West Africa, but it's been quite a while, and it's existed throughout the world for thousands of years since the beginning of civilization and prior to that. So it says here we've obtained internal emails from UCLA's medical school, supposedly one of the best in the country. If you want to understand how DEI and anti-white, anti-American hatred have been mainlined into the medical profession, you need to see this, Ben Shapiro said. I mean, anti-white, like, that's pretty ridiculous. It's okay to be white. I mean, my ancestry is Slavic. Slav is actually where the word slave comes from. We're as light-skinned as any other white person. I mean, it's Eastern Europe, right? Or where the majority of Slavs are. So it's a little ridiculous that they push these kinds of narratives. I'm going to start pushing a narrative that only Slavic people can say slave. It's our word, guys. It's our word. Only we can use it. No, I wouldn't do that. That'd be too ridiculous. Okay. Shapiro writes, we've obtained internal emails from UCLA's medical school, supposedly one of the best in the country. Well, not anymore. It's done, unless they change things up. If you want to understand how DEI and anti-white, anti-American hatred have been mainlined into the medical profession, read this thread. We're not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long, but you can look it up on Twitter if you want to, or now X. And, it's quite unfortunate that they're pushing this kind of nonsense. This just came out recently, right? March 1st, just a few days ago. And it's quite disgusting. It's really the death of the medical field. But let's remember, socialist and fascist all revolutions always seem to start in the education system, right? There, Lenin, Stalin, Pol Pot, I think Idi Amin were all teachers. The Maoist revolution was started in the education system, trying to overturn the country, starting with the young people. The Nazis tried to start with the young people, and they always try to do this because they know if they can capture the previous generation, they think it'll somehow work out for them in the end, and we don't want that to happen. So UCLA med students are told to read about wars of indigenous resistance in which Native Americans killed thousands of white people to imagine what liberation looks like. Oh my goodness, what? That's pretty nuts to push that kind of narrative. They're pushing it like that's a good thing. That's a little weird. I don't think we should do that. I think we should talk more about how America has advanced racially, and now all of us seem to live together just fine. Additionally, students are taught about blackness and indigeneity. I don't know if I said that right, and how we can imagine a world in the aftermath of settler colonialism and white supremacy. The med students are also urged to read an article called Decolonization is Not a Metaphor. Let's remember that the so-called colonizers went around the world and found cannibals everywhere from the Caribbean to New Zealand to the quite a lot of islands in the Pacific. So all over the world, there was some cannibalism in Africa as well. So it's not like everyone they met was the same. Some native groups were more peaceful than others. So learning about this is a little ridiculous, but it's that oppressor versus oppressed narrative. In that Marxist false dichotomy, you have to be in one or the other. And if you're a member of the oppressed group, you're part of the chosen people, which is a big part of the reason why a lot of these Marxists and communists are always so anti Semitic. Socialism and anti Semitism might as well be considered synonyms. Karl Marx was quite anti Semitic. But if you learn about 19th century socialists, which we maybe get into in a later video, then you know that socialism has always been anti Semitic. It's quite disgusting that that's the case, but it's true. Another source suggested for the students in this Indigene podcast, which covers topics like women, Exen, and two spirits. Let's remember two things here. One, you can't pronounce that word that has an X in the middle, and men also means everyone. So women are with the women with an E is already means and it already means women have their own word. It's not like they need to X out the men part. That doesn't make any sense. Two spirits is an ancient American phrase from the year of 1990. I'm not kidding you. It's not. It doesn't go back further than that. It was invented and at a get together in 1990. If you don't believe me, look that one up too. It's true. Why is it class like this even offered, much less mandatory for med students? Which lessons on anatomy, biochemistry, and saving lives were removed to add this woke, indigene nonsense into the curriculum? Shapiro asked. In the context of medical school, these materials aren't just irrelevant, they put lives at risk. Yes, should be the biggest concern. But Marxists don't care. They push ideology over reality. They don't believe in reality at all. Most of the socialist worldview comes from Hegelianism, right? Hegel and Marx, who completely reject real life. Medical students are being taught to disregard science and instead to build resentment towards many of their patients. Imagine that you have to do surgery on a person and you completely reject their existence. Man, how are you going to do your job properly if that's the case? It's going to be quite difficult, especially for a religious cult that pushes feelings over facts like the woke DEI enthusiasts tend to do. Responding to one whole thread, ex-owner Elon Musk said, "This is messed up." Well, Elon, I couldn't agree more. It just continues to get worse. There's more and more cases popping up now of these DEI professionals. I would hardly call them that, but they keep getting caught for plagiarizing because they don't deserve the jobs that they have. They're completely useless. So we're all familiar with this lady. She's quite useless, right? Claudine Gay was already accused of plagiarism, but it seems to me that they found a pattern. This is quite common amongst these DEI losers. They don't know what they're doing. Now we have this other guy whose name I can't pronounce, Alaid McKen, who's slapped with significant plagiarism allegations. And I guess we'll find out later if it's true, but I imagine it's going to turn out that way. We're going to find out that they got their job by faking it because there's nothing real about DEI and nothing useful about it. So it says here, Columbia University Irving Medical Center's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, Alaid McKen, has been accused of lifting significant material from sources such as Wikipedia. What a terrible source. My goodness, he doesn't even deserve to be in education. People have been saying since the beginning of Wikipedia that it's a bad source. I was told as a kid, don't use Wikipedia. It doesn't work. And he used it for his doctoral dissertation without attribution, according to Washington Free Beacon. My goodness. Hard to believe. Wikipedia. The writing's not even that good. That's just ridiculous. The allegations implicate approximately a fifth of McKen's 163-page dissertation, Ubuntu. I am because we are. Oh my goodness. Definitely racially motivated based on that title, I'm sure. A case study examining the experiences of African American centered rites of passage program with community based organizations. Yep, I was right. Submitted to Iowa State University School of Education in 2021. More than two of those pages are a near verbatim facsimile of Wikipedia's entry on Afrocentric education, which is not cited anywhere in the dissertation. Free Beacon reporter Aaron Siberian wrote, "Why are we even studying Afrocentric education? Hey, where's my Slavic and Irish centric education? I don't get that in public schools." The Free Beacon also published side-by-side images of the Wikipedia page in McKen's dissertation. Other pages lift paragraphs from well-known African scholars, including the University of Rwanda's Chika Enziana Eziobu while making small tweaks to their prose, such as reordering certain clauses or changing a word to a was. My goodness, that's so bad. That is high school level plagiarism. Maybe the occasional college student, but this guy is doing it for his doctorate, for his doctoral dissertation. That's just disgusting. What an embarrassment. What an embarrassment to the Ivy League schools. He shouldn't be there. None of these people should be there. Don't send your kids there. Don't do it. It's a waste of money, but it's also a waste of time. An expert on indigenous knowledge. We plagiarized someone up for that as well, who has worked with numerous international agencies, including the World Bank, aren't cited at all. When I was a college student, I guess I was mildly indoctrinated for a minute because I thought to myself that working for the World Bank or the IMF might be useful. But then I went to Korea and talked to Koreans, and they hate those organizations. They don't call it the 90s financial crisis. They don't call it a Korean crisis. They call it an IMF crisis because it was when the IMF tried to take control of their economy through debt, which banks try to do as well. But anyways, Columbia University has clear standards and policies regarding academic ethics and integrity for all members of our community. Yeah, well, you don't follow it, obviously, and we take allegations about misconduct seriously. Well, you did when it got in the news, right? They didn't really care before. They just were pushing ideology over education, and this is a high level school, so they shouldn't be doing that. We do not comment on the details of individual personal matters because you got nothing useful to say. You can't ignore the fact that you completely messed up here. Another one at the Columbia University Medical Center, right? Our medical centers, we do not want those to be controlled by woke indoctrinated communists. They do that in China, where they take the Falun Gong people, that religion, and use them as organ donors. That's quite terrible. So, yeah. But anyways, moving on. This article from the New York Post says that the DEI plagiarists are likely the tip of a vast pyramid of con artists. That's the Ivy League schools now. The league of unnecessary con artists that get tons of money from government. It's quite disgusting that this is the case. Yet another Ivy League chief for diversity, equity, inclusion stands exposed as an apparent plagiarist, further suggesting DEI is more of a racket than anything else. I'm afraid that the school system itself is becoming a racket. The top DEI officer at Columbia Medical School, Elaine McCann, stands accused of lifting about a fifth of his thesis from 30 other academics. Every single one of those academics should sue not only McCann, but the university itself for not looking into that. A fifth of his thesis should be easy to look into, especially when it's from something as obvious as Wikipedia, right? They should be sued. So, this comes just a week after news of whistleblowers' complaint against Shirley Green, a DEI officer at Harvard. Let's remember statistics about Yale and Harvard. The ratio of administrators to students at Yale and Harvard is 1-to-1. They have as many administrators as they do students. How disgusting is that? Imagine how inexpensive their education could be if they just fired all of them or the majority of them. That'd be amazing. And weeks after Harvard's DEI officer, Sherry Ann Charleston, got hit with an anonymous complaint alleging dozens of instances of plagiarism in her work over the last 15 years. Sounds like we have something that's more than a conspiracy theory. It's definitely true, right? People are starting to speak out. This is great. People are getting self-confident again about criticizing DEI. You know what this means, though? These people knew about this beforehand, and they were scared to speak out. But it's going to start an avalanche. It's going to start a waterfall of accusations, and these DEI people are going to get destroyed. But watch out, because they will try to rebrand their nonsense. All this follows the fall of Harvard President Claudine Gay, whose hiring was also DEI, over dozens of plagiarism allegations, which evidently inspired a wave of freelance detective work. I love it. I love it. Get out there, sleuthers, and start calling these people out. It seems likely to keep the complaints coming after many more recent hires across academia. All these scandals are hitting the Ivies. I've never heard of the Ivy Leagues referred to as the Ivies, but I'm not part of that special group, so I'm an outsider, which presumably find the best Imagine how low other universities have sunk as they have hired thousands of DEI bureaucrats over the last decade. Well, they've hired thousands of completely useless people who don't know what the heck they're talking about, let alone the public school systems rushing to adopt DEI as states like New Jersey mandate it. Well, we all knew New Jersey sucks anyways. There's a song on an album by the band called the Bloodhound Gang called The 10 Best Things About New Jersey, and it's just 10 seconds of silence. So that should tell you enough about New Jersey. Next up, we have people beginning to fight against it. This is one of the people who's chosen to do it out there in the public, right? Ann Eubank's political interest started with anti-Common Core. Remember, Common Core is the ridiculous political indoctrination pushing things like the idea that 2 plus 2 can equal 5. No, it can't. But people educated in Common Core will lead themselves to believing that sort of nonsense. But she's fighting back in Alabama, and I think that's great. And Eubank started going to Alabama State House in 2010 to protest Common Core standards aimed at providing consistency in state educational standards. Well, I'm leaning towards the idea. I've been a teacher for more than 10 years, and I don't know that these educational standards are that great. It seems to me that we need diversity of thoughts, diversity of education, and diversity of career paths. Like if a kid's interested in something, maybe you should just go full on towards figuring out how interested they actually are. Like, okay, you say you're interested in that topic. Let's see how far we can go. You willing to study this all day, every day? But anyways, so I went to the legislature and I started fighting there. She said, and I've been there since then. Good. I'm glad she's there, and she needs to keep doing that fantastic work. Eubank, a Republican, is running to represent District 3. There aren't enough right wingers in education right now, especially especially in the college. It's 12-1 now. That's the lowest estimate I've seen. So we need more of them. We need more of them on school boards. We need to get into trying to positively influence the education system because we let the left control it for decades now, and it's become significantly worse. The district runs through the middle of the state and includes different counties. She said she decided to run to start the Marxification of education, quoting James Lindsay. And this article claims he's a right-wing author. That's actually not true. He's more on the side of right-wingers now on these topics, but he's historically been left-wing. He hasn't done like some others have done in starting to call themselves right-wing. He more thinks he's more. He thinks of himself more of a classical liberal. Who appears in the Southern Poverty Law Center's extremist files. Well, I mean, if the Southern Poverty Law Center hates you, then I got to tell you, you're winning because that organization is completely corrupted, which is sad. I wish they weren't. Which site is anti-LGBT rhetoric? That's not true. People aren't anti-LGBT just because they don't want children to be manipulated or little kids to, be forced to discuss sexual innuendo as part of queer theory, right? Florida tried to ban the discussion of those things in third grade and below. Third grade and below. That's quite young. And the leftists still freaked out about that. Those people aren't liberals, certainly not conservatives, but they aren't liberals either. Eubank said that Common Core was part of the transformation of America, and she says it lowered standards. No shit. I mean, are you kidding? The ability of students to read has only gone downhill for the past 10 years. In order to close the gap, everybody had to become common, and nobody could be taught better than anybody else, she said. The famed author and former teacher John Taylor Gatto pointed out that before people enter the public schools, these little kids often test out as genius level, and that all goes away as they're pushed towards being normal, being common, right? It's really sad if you think about it much. And what happens to these kids? You're taught to be a follower, and the education system is designed just like the prisons. The format is the same. It's disappointing. The woke policies, the sexual revolution policies, man, was that a failure, the sexual revolution. That's not what public school is for, she said. Public school is to teach children history, math, and how to read. What a concept, so that they can be a productive citizen. That's what I want. The Alabama House of Representatives Wednesday approved a voucher like program that would extend up to $7,000 in tax credits. Yes. Clap for that. That's fantastic. That should happen across the country. They have school choice in some Northern European countries, and they're considered more left wing than the United States. Why aren't we doing that there? Come on, let's get with the program, America. School choice. It's not a panacea, but it is a positive move in the right direction. Eubank said that she supports education savings accounts, but was working. She supported, but was working through the practicalities of this year's legislation from the governor. Quote, I think it's a parent's God given right to educate their children as they see fit, she said. Damn right. You're right. And here's the results of Common Core. Okay, half of college grads are working high school level jobs. I mean, sure, we're talking about college and Common Core is K through 12, but nevertheless, colleges keep having to move backwards. They've been doing that for at least 20 years because students aren't coming into the college ready to learn. They don't learn anything about study habits and they don't care. They're not motivated to do it. They spent 12 years being told what to do and taught to be followers. You can't just go into college and expect them to suddenly become creative individuals when they've been pushed down for the previous 12 years and told that creativity is a bad thing. So, best economy ever, guys. Yeah, I mean, there's some economic problems here too. Minimum wage rules have, or laws have been limiting the ability of young people to go to work, teenagers to go to work for a long time. Thomas Sowell points out that in the first half of the 20th century, there were many years where black teenagers had higher rates of employment than white teenagers, and the minimum wage laws killed that. So I think we should go back to 14-year-olds having jobs, just part-time jobs, not working 60 hours a week, but going to school in the mornings and working in the afternoons would create far better citizens who would have far better voting habits and would learn to understand scarcity, right? That's so important, an ability to learn scarcity. 52% of recent college grads, a year after completing their bachelor's degree, are working jobs that don't require a college degree. What's more, 10 years after completing their bachelor's degree, still 45% of these grads are underemployed. That's pretty sad. And people are quite unhappy about it. So, this article from CBS News shows that people are quite skeptical of the current state of education. If you see these statistics, you'll understand why. Americans are increasingly skeptical of the value of post secondary education at a time when college attendance costs are soaring. In some cases, those doubts may be justified. According to a new analysis of earnings data from almost 4,000 colleges, so that's not bad. That's a lot. It's not students, it's colleges and other higher education programs. A decade, now this is the important part, okay? A decade after enrolling, attendees of 1 in 4 higher education programs are earning less than the median annual income of $32,000 for high school graduates. Like let that sink in for a second. Less than $32,000 and you have a college degree. Like, you're an indentured servant at that point. I mean, you made your choice, right? As many indentured servants of the past chose to do. But, spending thousands of dollars on your humanities degree, you're making under 32 grand, you can't pay it off. Of course you're going to vote Democrat and hope that they write that off. So you have to wonder if this is intentional. Although, again, I think it's mostly just stupidity because these people don't know what the heck they're doing. According to the HEA group, which analyzed data from the completely useless and worthless Department of Education to track the earnings outcomes of above 5 million students. So we know this is true because, I mean, most studies, most polls involve a couple thousand people, maybe even 1,000 people for a national poll. They're looking at millions of people and they realize these statistics. So it is true. 1 in 4 higher education programs are not preparing students for the job, for the real world and for real jobs. Man, that is disappointing. I'm sad. About 8% of institutions show their students' median income a decade after enrolling is less than $22,000 a year, or about 150% of the federal poverty line, low enough to qualify for some public assistance programs. Because we're teaching kids that the college education is some panacea, but you can't do it. You can't spend tens of thousands of dollars for a humanities degree or even most social sciences degrees. If you're going to college, go to business, IT, go get or go get a vocational certificate or something. You could also go to medical. I see some corruption in these industries, but it's or in these fields, but it's not as bad as the rest of the humanities. So to be sure, the majority of colleges are producing graduates who out earn people with only high school degrees, and economic research points to a well documented wage premium. But that seems to be the advantage seems to be declining, and I think that it's going to decline even more as businesses realize that it's really not that important to hire a college graduate because they go to college thinking that they deserve all of this even though they have no work experience. It's really bad to get a college degree and come out in your mid 20s not having any real world experience, not having ever worked a job in your life. It's just not a very good sign. So what happens? Oh, here we go. Americans have college degree justifies taking on debt, which currently tops $37,000 per borrower. You're not paying that off if you only make 30 grand a year. I mean, that's just going to go on forever. The main reason why students go to college is for greater employability and for financially secure future. Yeah, that's not happening. So they're just getting indoctrinated. And what's the result of that? People are getting fired for saying things that don't meet the narrative, right? This Thompson Reuters guy is a data scientist that was fired from his 350K role by woke bullies for sharing data showing cops kill more unarmed white people than black people. They don't really kill that many people. The number of people the cops kill every year tends to be around like 20 or 30. Yet, if you're a woke indoctrinated college student, you tend to think it's in the thousands. I've watched some videos on YouTube of classrooms of children, really can hardly call them adults, who argue for that kind of nonsense. So he was a former director and data scientist, and claimed he was fired after sharing his research on race and police killings and with colleagues. Kriegman posted stats showing cops in the U.S. killed more unarmed white people than black people since 2015, like during the whole woke BLM Antifa nonsense. So we freak out about one individual death like George Floyd, not realizing that 100,000 people are dying from fentanyl every year in this country. Kriegman said he said he was ridiculed and bullied by colleagues, and when he asked leadership for help, his post was taken down and he was fired for voicing an opinion that wasn't part of the mainstream narrative. That is terrible. That should not be happening. Kriegman said he wanted his research to spark a conversation amongst reporters at the company's newswire service about how to cover the issue. He's the latest person to claim they faced hostility from a woke Marxist mob running rampant in the workplace. It's gotten really bad. The woke Karens that want to ruin everyone who has a slightly different opinion, because they believe that only a very narrow set of worldviews are allowed to be expressed. So, anyways, and then these guys just recently got canceled. 4 comedians, at least one of them I like quite a bit. The other ones I don't know that I like. Shane Gillis is hilarious. I don't really know the rest of them, but and this article I can't access, but progressives canceled him at a comedy club because they made jokes that I didn't like. A bunch of Karen progressives are canceling comedians, and a lot of comedians won't go to college campuses anymore, right? Some Chappelle said that, Seinfeld said that, Bill Burr said that they won't go to college campuses anymore. So it's all nonsense. So anyways, and then this article says it all fell apart. Fearless Fund founder on impact of DEI lawsuits. As conservative groups continue to go after DEI based grant programs, the firms that provide them, including Fearless Fund and Hello Alice, are struggling. And they promise to fight back. No, you're going to lose. The world is turning against DEI, and it's disgusting. Marxist indoctrination. So Inc. used to be a good entrepreneurial themed magazine, and apparently is quite woke now. I mean, they literally have a section here called diversity in business. Are you kidding me? Like they're just complete trash. And the Inc. has if you pick up one of their magazines, it's just half of its advertisements now. It just doesn't have any real content. So we're not going to spend too much time with this article because we want them to lose. And they will lose in the long run. This is another article called "Assault from the Ivory Tower: The Professor's War Against America." And this comes from a lecture delivered at Boston's Ford Hall way back in '83. They were talking about how woke professors, they didn't use woke to define them back then, but how the ivory tower tends to hate America. And they've really indoctrinated public school kids with that, which is why so many of them are now considering socialism as an alternative, which is an anti-Semitic philosophy, right? Socialism is forced collectivism and no freedom at all. And you get that from from the Noam Chomsky's and the Howard Zinns of the world. Unfortunately, those two. Well, one Howard Zinn considers himself a communist. He's said that before, and then Noam Chomsky has said he's an anarcho-syndicalist, but that which actually sounds closer to fascism to me. Like it's a path to the communist utopia through trade unions. And let's remember what fascism means, right? What's the etymology or word origin of fascism? It's fasci, which means trade unionist. Mussolini and Hitler didn't eliminate the trade unions; they consolidated them. That's the big lie. The big lie from socialists is to say that the fascists destroy unions. No, they consolidate them and use them to run the country. So fascism is really just socialism pretending not to be. It says here intellectuals around the world generally take a certain pride, whether deserved or not, in their own country's achievements and traditions. When they lash out at some group, it is not their nation, but some villain allegedly threatening it, such as the rich, the Jews, that's the anti Semitism of Marxism, or the West. This pattern is true of Canada, from which I originally came, and it's true to my knowledge of England, France, Germany, Russia, and China. But it is not true of America. So I mean, I might disagree with this slightly. I think pseudo-intellectual losers have a strong tendency to try to destroy the local environment. Socialists and fascists tend to hate their own people in their own country more than somebody outside of it. One of the most striking things I observed when I first came here was the disapproval, the resentment, even the hatred of America, of the country as such, and of most things American, which is displayed by American intellectuals. It is especially evident among professors in the humanities and social sciences, whom I came to know the best. Oh man, that's true. It's sad because those things could really be teaching people how to think, but they've reneged on their uh, responsibilities to this country and this nation's youth. Typically, these professors regard the American political system, capitalism, as barbaric, anachronistic, selfish. They tell their classes that the American past is a record of brutal injustice. I mean, I would say that about all of human history, right? Unfortunately, through our 100 or 200,000 year history of humanity, we've essentially been born in the blood and dirt. I mean, 2/3 of children throughout hunter-gatherer societies died before the age of 6, all the way up until 1800 before we started finally having some economic improvements, and then later on some health-based improvements. They describe the American people as materialistic, insensitive, and racist. Well, guess what? You need certain things to survive, and it's not unusual to um, collect more items when your income rises. But Americans are also, I think, pretty great in getting involved in charity. I think that's a huge accomplishment for Americans. Something that they choose to do regularly. But anyway, this is a good article from courses.aynrand.org. You might check this one out if you have a chance. It's a little bit long, but it's worth the time. So if you get a chance, I would check that out. And the end of all of this indoctrination, is that more and more people are leaving the left. They're sick of leftism. They're sick of people following that noble savage theory, which is this idea that minorities are somehow below everyone else and don't have the capability to run their own lives. And that's the issue that the Democrat Party pushes on Black, Latino, and Asian voters. So they're now deciding to leave the Democrat Party, and more of them are choosing to vote for Trump. Does Trump have the best personality in the world? No, but I don't think he's a racist. I think that if you look at his record as a business person, he was quite helpful to many minority groups throughout history, and he gets a bad rap because he moved from Democrat to Republican. So hopefully the Democrats are going to get trounced in the upcoming election. They saw it coming, which is why they, during Biden's administration, allowed 7.5 million illegal immigrants into the country. So hopefully Trump will kick a lot of those people out because, uh, you know, we can't have that many people on the welfare doles. So at least it's been a good lesson to some of these cities that claimed that they were going to save all the illegal immigrants and so on. And they didn't engage in that at all. So, AmericanFirstPolicy.com has this article as well about reversing the woke takeover of higher education. So I hope that actually happens, right? We need to dismantle campus DEI so we can bring back diversity of thought. That's far more important than diversity of anything else. On campuses, we want to be able to discuss things and issues openly. All right, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this longer video than I usually post. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more.